Hello, here on Facebook as well. I just started the Instagram feed over there, and now we can actually start this Type 1 Thursday with me, Hanna, one of the co-founders of the Low Carb Universe. And this whole thing is, of course, ahead of our event coming up, which is, of course, diabetes. And that is the world's first event that is solely dedicated to low carb and all types of diabetes. So I really think that you should join us in June in beautiful, beautiful Stockholm, Sweden, or just outside of it, for a midsummer celebration and also learning a lot about diabetes, low carb, and how to improve your life and lifestyle and health with those things. Anyway, today we are, I hope we are, but I am definitely talking about how many carbs one should have as a type 1 diabetic, because I actually got a question from a viewer, which was very, very interesting. And this was, are you following Dr. Bernstein's 6-12-12 or applying a different approach? How should we compose our meals? And this was, also went hand in hand, of course, with the how many carbs should a type 1 diabetic have every day and all this stuff. Because the answer to this question is, of course, as with everything else when it comes to health, it's individual. It's very individual where you feel good when you depending on how many carbs you eat. Of course, no one is going to feel as good on a very, very high carb standard sort of American or Western diet as they will on a lower carb diet. But how low carb you go as a type 1 diabetic, that is entirely up to you, where you feel good, where you see the results you need to see, or want to see, need to see, prefer to see, and where you can sort of maintain this without it becoming too much of a pressure and too much of a bother in your real life, because we all have them and we all have those stressy days, and this way of eating should complement this and not make it even harder, because then there's really no point. So just to go back to the whole Dr. Bernstein, who of course wrote the fantastic book, My Diabetic Bible, Diabetes Solution, he suggests that one eats 6 grams of carbs for breakfast, 12 grams of carbs for lunch, and 12 grams of carbs again for dinner. And this is, of course, fantastic. He's proven it. He is a fantastic both type 1 diabetic himself and a fantastic doctor. So he knows what he's talking about. It's been tried and tested. But perhaps you find out that this doesn't quite suit you and your needs, your preferences, your hunger, all of these things. So maybe you have to switch it up a little bit. And I can only relate to myself here for today, because I'm the only one here. But for example, I do like this. I don't eat breakfast at all because I'm just not hungry, and I don't see the point of stressing my system and my blood sugar with more food than my body's asking for. So that's why I don't really, if I am super hungry and I wake up and I'm super hungry, of course, then I will have breakfast. But if I'm not feeling that, I am not doing it, because I see it as a waste of both energy and calories that I could use for things that I actually want to eat, the carbs that I actually want to eat, instead of just eating them for eating them sake. On the other hand, that means that my personal carb count probably is a bit lower than 30. I haven't checked in a long time, so I don't really know, but it probably is a bit lower than 30. It's probably around 20, 25 a day, which actually suits me fantastically well. I feel satiated, I feel happy, I feel most of the days energetic, but maybe not all of the days. But that probably doesn't have too much to do with the food. But yeah, so there is really that individual aspect of trying to find what sort of level of carbs work for you, what calories work for you, and also what are your goals? What are you trying to achieve? Is your is your main goal of eating low carb a stable, normal, healthy blood sugar? Or do you, for example, also have weight to lose? I mean, all of these things have a factor in this, so you really have to model your diet or your way of eating alongside what you want to achieve and how you how you feel achieving it. So that is one point. So the question of what is low carb, that there's a beautiful saying in Swedish, hur långt är ett snöre. It basically means how long is a piece of string. It can be anything, but generally it's sort of said between 0 carbs and 100 carbs, sort of, and anything that is lower than the Western normal standard Western diet sort of thing. And that is where you have your playing field of finding out what works for you. And that does involve a lot of trial and error and a lot of blood sugar checks and a lot of changing your insulin dosages and everything. But once you figure this out, it will be so worth it, and you will feel so much healthier and happier and more at ease, because that is also, of course, an important factor when it comes to diabetes management, and especially in type 1, because that is perhaps slightly more tricky than, for example, type 2. Yes, and then 3 types of testing that I think that you should do so that you find out what works out the best for you. So I really think that you should find what sort of limit of carbs you want to play around with, and where sort of you feel comfortable with the foods you're eating, with the results you're getting. You know, I'm going back over the same things again and again, but that's sort of where the really main point is. So you have to find out, where do you want to start playing? If you are eating a standard sort of westernized diet, or I would say you start at around maybe lower to 100 grams first of carbs a day, and then see where you go from there. Do you feel good like that? Do you feel not good like that? Do you need to go back up again? Or could you even go even lower straight away? And this is how I did it, of course. And as I talked about in my story episode last week, about going step by step by step. So I went from a normal standard westernized diet to kicking out step by step. And this is how you can do it as well. And I have another video on that, of course, which you may or may not have seen, but how to do it and in what sort of circumstances. And that's, that's up to you. But I do suggest you start sort of higher and then work your way lower in terms of carbs. I also feel that you have a lot of playing around to do with your meal timing. This does not, I repeat, it does not require you to eat like the prescribed 6 times a day with breakfast, a snack, lunch, a snack, dinner, and another snack, because your body most probably doesn't need to eat that often at all. It may be feeling even better if you eat fewer times a day. And this is, of course, where intermittent fasting comes in a little bit, and that I will do another episode on especially, but just so I mention it, because you have to listen to your body and see what sort of meal timings work the best for you. As I said, I don't eat breakfast because I'm not hungry. Every dietitian I met since making that decision has looked at me strangely, apart from a few that are already in the low carb field, but the normal ones. And that's fine with me. I mean, I'm listening to my body and I'm doing so that I feel better in my health and my diabetes. And I don't understand why they shouldn't have such a strong opinion about my life choices. I'm not harming myself. I'm actually feeling better. So that's argument enough for me. Also, of course, you have to test out insulin dosages. When do you need to take your basal insulin, and how does that work with your meal timing, for example? You also have to find out, maybe you are more insulin sensitive during some certain hours of the day in comparison to others. And that's how you can also get a meal in that is better or easier to control, because your body's just simply that much more insulin sensitive. If you are, of course, this is something else that intermittent fasting is very good at, and I will of course take that up in the episode that is all about that, but this is also where intermittent fasting is really, really good. It really improves your insulin sensitivity. So that's a good argument for it. And that leads me to my next point. That is, of course, intermittent fasting. Could you play around with it? Are you maybe not hungry as often as you think that you should be hungry? Listen to your body. And this is something that Bitte and I talk about all the time in both our podcast and everywhere else, is really that you dare to listen to your body, because you are not like everyone else, and you are an individual, and we all, well, maybe not all of us, but some of us need very individualized approaches to both amounts of carbs and meal timing. So bear that in mind, and do you. That's all that we can really ask for. And the whole thing with meal composition, which is sort of a tricky question actually, because of course in the beginning you want these like meal plans and everything for low carb, so that you know that you're eating the right amount of stuff and the right things and all of this stuff. But when you've sort of gotten over that first hurdle, how about you just keep carbs to a minimum, eat adequate amounts of protein, and use fat as a lever so that you get to your goal where you have to be. And the main point is just so that you keep, when you've figured out when you need to eat, or when you actually are hungry, how many carbs you feel the best on, your insulin timings, maybe your intermittent fasting, then you just make sure that the total carbs that you eat during a day, they're kept at or underneath your personal limit. And it's not really harder than that. I personally, as I said, I eat twice a day, and I feel very, very well and nourished from it, and I don't see the point of eating any more than that. I hope this video has brought you something new, and if not, check in next week and maybe you'll learn something new that time. If you have any questions, leave a comment, and I promise that I will answer. See you next time.